Okay, hello everyone, welcome. For those that have been involved in the session this morning, really hope you've enjoyed those sessions and found them valuable and hopefully managed to stretch your legs in the lunch break. Just while we wait a couple of minutes and say to admit people and make sure everyone's in the right session that they want to be in, if anyone's got any reflections or points that really struck with them this morning that they want to put in the chat, then please feel free to do that. And I'll just check everyone's in, and I know we've got a lot to fit in, so we'll try and get started ASAP. So I think everybody has been admitted, so let's get going. This session is really about the Patchwork programme and in practice, and we're going to be hearing from 3 different teams today, each sharing their learnings, their insights and their stories about translating physical literacy into practice within the early years and families settings. You can see from the screen that we've got a diverse list of organisations who are going to talk today, and they've been grouped into 3 teams, and each of those teams is going to spend 6 or 7 minutes talking to you about what they've been doing. As we go along, if you've got any questions or comments, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll try and get to as many of those as possible as we can at the end, but we're going to do that after all 3 teams have presented to make sure that we hear from every single person involved. And we'll also have plenty of time in the breakout group, the listening circles, to go into a bit more depth in some of those themes or ideas that have come out. So let's kick off. Without further ado, I think we're going to switch the order around, so bear with me while I'm flicking through the slides. But we're going to start with active families and Nikki, Jo and Becky. My slides aren't moving. Can anyone see the slides moving?
No.
Not yet.
Okay.
Maybe click on that bit there.
Oh.
Yeah, it's updated now.
Right, here we go.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
You want the introduction one?
Yeah, if we could just go back to the first slide, I'll just kind of introduce us. So I'm Jo, and I work for Alive. We've got Becky, who is part of Active Norfolk, and then we've got Nikki, who works for Children's Services at the Family Hub. So our project is Active Families. We currently run in 2 sessions of our Active Families programme in the local area. With varying successes, we've had a few challenges along the way. But working together collaboratively, I think we've done really, really well, and hopefully that will be showed in this brief presentation. So if we can move along to the next slide, please.
So through sort of working quite collaboratively, we were looking to organise that disconnect and the chaos that came about. So we've linked it to a very well-known story of the Wizard of Oz and directing Dorothy to her end destination and back to her home. So we just sort of worked with the Family Hub to discover that parents, particularly within those deprived areas, weren't engaging with local provisions, and that there was more demand for parents and children to do in the area. So we then focused our project initially in those areas of high income deprivation, children living in poverty, and also high percentages of overweight children. And we wanted to work with those local families to allow them to understand that they are the ones that can influence their children's behaviours. So we took that opportunity to work collaboratively with those families and the local leisure provider, and to sort of provide them with the guidance in their own journeys in creating those positive experiences with movement. And that links to hopefully this story of Dorothy on the Wizard of Oz and directing her along the right path. Next slide, please.
Okay, so what we learned. So on our Active Families journey, we've learned a lot about ourselves, it's worth saying, about our organisations and how we work with children, young people and families. So in our story, children, young people and families are represented by Dorothy and Toto going along the path, as Becky's just said. So for us, the Yellow Brick Road leads to the Emerald City, where we've got children, young people and families enjoying positive experiences of physical literacy, and their physical literacy is developing. So similar to the story of the Wizard of Oz, on the path we encounter the Scarecrow, the Tin Man and the Lion during the journey, and this represents us and our kind of patchwork trio, if you like, and some of our learning and roles. So things that we learned along the way that was important to us was that to keep Dorothy and Toto moving forward, we need to walk alongside families. So this is very much about working with families, not leading them and not doing too. So it's an important point of our project. So the Scarecrow represents us finding that we knew that having local knowledge is really key. We needed to know the places and spaces that families use and feel is accessible if we're going to maximise impact. So piggybacking on initiatives and spaces that families enjoy helped us establish some quick momentum and quick gains really for us to move forward. And what we really learned there was don't reinvent the wheel. There are lots of applications in our county that we've utilised and brought in and linked together. So the 50 Things app for children under 5 and the PEEP approach, which has been rolled out as a kind of family home learning project. We're really interested in going a step further and looking at a PEEP Move initiative, where what we're basically being able to do is upskill parents to take the lead ultimately in moving forward and showing their children and giving their children those experiences and opportunities to have memorable moments and enjoy moving. Tin Man represents how we learned that we need to have empathy, we need to involve families, ensure they're heard and their voices are understood, and that we also appreciate the choices that they have to make. So we talked about social anxiety and was a big barrier for us, and some of our vulnerable groups of people really only engage when they have trusted professionals that they could work with. So we needed to link in with health and early years professionals. And then our Lion represents how we have to do things differently. So having the agility and the courage to take risks. Strategic alignment doesn't always equal operational alignment. So there's a need for some operational autonomy and for us to do things differently. And we've done that with a test and trial approach. So hopefully we'll build on that going forward.
So yeah, we've kind of had a few beliefs and bets and what we think we want the project to look like and the outcomes we want to reach. So we want parents to become the first teachers. We want them to take an active role in teaching their children how physical literacy works. We want them being their role model as such. So when they come to our sessions, we try to teach them how to lead small areas of their child's session, whether it just be throwing a beanbag into a hoop or something like that. We're then going to encourage them to do at-home activities. As you can see on the slide, there's a bubble burst card there, which is just an example of what we do. They can take this home, and this is something that they can use on the outside, therefore kind of becoming a role model again, but away from our session. And then we're going to try and kind of identify parent champions. So these people in local communities who are quite big characters who we can then work with to understand better how that community needs and wants physical literacy to be seen and how we can deliver it successfully. And then kind of moving forward, we think that this can help kind of engage people for a love for movement. They can go and engage in their local green spaces, which we have lots of here in West Norfolk. And then finally, just educating parents and carers about how actually physical literacy and being active is so important to not only their child's development, but themselves as a person. And then kind of through all of these things, just making sure that there's kind of a love for being active and being on the move across the whole family. And then on the next slide, you'll just see like a few photos from our sessions and a video, but obviously we're a bit short of time. So yeah, they're just some photos from our sessions which we've been running.
Fab. Next slide, please. So our learnings and the progress that we've made. So initially we discovered that not necessarily one size fits all, that things work differently in different communities, and we needed to adapt and change to those communities' needs. And then from an outside perspective, that communities that might seem similar, they still have those challenges, but they are slightly different challenges. And again, it's making sure that our approach is slightly different to suit the needs of those individuals within that community. Being very flexible with our approach and understanding that it is an iterative process and that there is that need to work flexibly and also adapting to customer feedback. It's a different way of working, and establishing actually that it is, and notifying that it is something that we need to build on, is that feedback that we get from those customers, and it's something that we need to work with. And then sort of growth, there are current projects going on in the area, such as Marmot, the neighbourhood plan and things, and we're looking to use those projects as well to help educate others on learnings, challenges and opportunities, and how we have helped to overcome those. I know we're very short on time, so I will skip to Nikki onto the last slide.
Okay, so for us, giving parents and carers the power has made all the difference. So helping parents recognise their role as first teachers for physical literacy, we feel, is going to be key to a sustainable approach that can shift culture and cultural habits. We are just as supporting characters, just to say. So Active Families has started us to think about how we shift that focus from doing to, doing with, and ultimately a step further to do it yourself. And this is just a quote from The Wizard of Oz we thought was quite helpful to reflect on that. So yeah, that's us really. So our call to action is to ask you to go away and help parents learn how to guide their own children to move and have fun, with low and no cost activities, and giving them ideas as part of their everyday lives.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. I'm loving all the Wizard of Oz references. Sorry, I'm going to flick back through the slides, and we're going to go on to the next team with Sharon, Jess and Jane. Thanks.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much. So this is Beyond Movement, and I'm Sharon Cantor, one of the Senior Quality and Outcomes Consultants in Bolton. The other arms of the trio are Jess, who is the Active Children's Lead, and Jane, who is the School Readiness Lead in GMCA. So our story, we're going to illustrate it through the ripple effect. So not long after the consensus statement was launched, Jess was invited to start the conversation about physical literacy, as you can see on the next slide. So what we have here is just some illustrations of our journey. So when Jess came to talk about physical literacy in a group that had been established for a long time, it was as if Jess had dropped a physical literacy stone into the early years pond. I, like other people, were like the robot that you can see here. It was a revelation. It was like all the pieces had fallen into place. We had been working on developing physical literacy, and we realized that we were looking through the blinker of just a physical literacy view. But when Jess spoke about physical literacy, we could all see that it was the missing piece. It was an opportunity to look at physical development, but beyond movement. It was a holistic approach that could, once people grasped it, make a holistic change to the way that people engage with children in the early year setting. I'm going to hand over to Jess to just explain in more detail what she did and how she inspired us.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. So I think just finishing off this slide, I think it was just really quick. It was really quickly that I took the learning that I've been doing across Greater Manchester with other networks and partners, that actually the whole opportunity for the workforce and the people who are trying to kind of get on board and you know, get that robot to kind of get the pieces to fall into place, was that we needed to get them to relate to their own relationship with movement. We recognise we've got a workforce that potentially have a negative relationship with movement, and actually that's where we needed to start in order to affect against the children that we were trying to ensure that they had a positive experience with movement in the early years settings. So I'll come on to the next couple of slides, and this is kind of how we've gone about it. We've been lucky in the respect that we had a good starting point through kind of the work that Jane has done at Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and Sharon has been involved in on the physical development pathway stuff. So why did we decide to kind of embrace and come on this journey, and how was this going to help our kind of, I guess, problems or issues that I've identified in Greater Manchester? So the left-hand image illustrates that some of the things that we were looking to achieve by kind of looking through this lens of physical literacy. We knew that once kind of children were getting to 5 and over, they weren't achieving the measured amount of physical activity, 60 minutes of activity a day. We knew that through data and insight that physical development, we wanted to improve outcomes on that, and that actually this was potentially hindering that good level of development within early years across GM. We saw it as that opportunity to upskill the workforce, as Sharon said, about to help solve issues that we've been trying to solve for years, but through that physical literacy lens. And it was an opportunity, as the jigsaw shows, to show where physical literacy came in to support those ambitions around physical development and school readiness. And we kind of knew that physical literacy absolutely played a role in supporting physical activity and physical development, which in turn would support school readiness. And we wanted to use that opportunity for the workforce to understand the crucial role that they played in inspiring children to have a positive and long-lasting relationship with movement from conception to reception. So next slide, please. So in terms of this one, if you were on the call this morning, you will have seen that the image I shared in terms of the crossroads. And I think we saw this as an opportunity in the work that we've done. We saw this as an opportunity for to equip those children in our early year settings with that positive relationship with movement, the bag that they're carrying on their back, so that when they get those crossroads, they can choose that active pathway. And that's what we hope to achieve through the work that we've done as part of the patchwork. We also want the children and the practitioners that we're working with to understand that connection between moving their body also helps them feel good. It's not just about that opportunity to move. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of the approach that we took, so I'm not going to go through this in particular detail. You can have a look at it on the screen, and we started it on our slide, but we took a very much a relate and translate approach. So we said, in order for this to work, the workforce is going to have to relate with this. They're going to have to understand their own relationship with movement, and perhaps why that either hinders or in some cases absolutely provides loads of opportunities for movement and throughout the day, but also how that was ensuring that it was a positive experience of movement, and it wasn't just a movement opportunity. So what we did was we created two groups. One group that was kind of just going to get this information, hear about what physical literacy was, get their opportunity to relate to themselves and think about how can I apply this to my practice. The second group was a translate group, and that was where we asked them to go away and say, right, okay, you've heard what physical literacy is now. You understand that actually it's not just about the opportunity to move. It's not just about those opportunities that you put into place into your practice. It's about ensuring that they're positive, and how do we get children to kind of reflect and get feedback on how that activity's made them feel. Go away and start to kind of try where that will work in terms of settings that you're working with, parent groups that you're working with, pathways, physical development kind of intervention pathways, and try and embed that physical literacy approach and thinking and lens to support ensuring that the children and young people are getting those positive experiences of movement alongside the actual opportunity. Next slide, please. So in terms of what this actually looked like, and again, not going to go into too much detail, and you might not be able to read the detail on the form on the left hand side, but we ran, so as part of the relate group, so that was kind of this universal offer out to the physical development pathway group that we were already working with Jane. We said, come to a session, come and hear about what physical literacy is, come and relate to it yourself. But before you do that, what's your starting point on that? What does that look like? So, what do you understand the words physical literacy to mean? What does that actually look like in your practice? And the reflection a lot of the time was actually there's loads of good practice going on around embedding physical literacy and that messaging around it. But sometimes the understanding of that potentially wasn't there. So that was really good opportunity for us to get people in the room and get them on that same page, talking about that language and showing the distinction between physical literacy, physical activity, physical development, and how it supported that school readiness. So we came on to kind of what we're learning. So next slide, please. So what we've learned along the way in terms of trying to embed that in the two different approaches, the relate and the translate. We're definitely hearing, and we heard it this morning as part of the conference, that we need to be getting practitioners to think about moments over minutes. So it doesn't just matter that you provide an opportunity to move. Actually, what's the experience of that opportunity from a child's perspective? Child's voice has come through massively. So actually, a lot of those that attend the training said, actually, do we ask a child after they've done an activity how that made them feel? We've said about kind of the workforce's own relationship with movement and then reflecting themselves to be able to think about the practice that they take. The confusing image and the 6 and the 9 is again probably linked more to the language and the way that people interpret physical literacy. We know when we work in education in early years, when you say the term literacy, does that land? Do people know what we're talking about? And people get a little bit confused about, are we talking about reading and writing? So we've definitely experienced that, and it's about kind of repetition and continuing to have that conversation about actually, no, it's not about reading and writing, it's about our relationship with movement. And that kind of alludes to that language picture there. And then finally, people do want resources. They understand it, and then they say, but what does this actually look like in practice? And that's where Sharon and Jane have been integral in the respect that they've been able to kind of bring it to life, and then those other members in the Translate group have also been able to kind of say, well, this is what it actually looks like when you're, in a setting and having a conversation with a practitioner or with a child. So on to kind of just the ripples that we've started to create, really. And I'm going to start this slide, and I'll quickly hand back to Sharon just to finish on some of those, and then Jane just to for our call to action. So in terms of the ripples that we've had so far, I think they speak for themselves in terms of what's on the screen. But I think the one that was great to see when we ran that Relate session for me was that the top one, it's got the cogs going on how our approach in our organisation across all of our delivery service activity sessions to address physical literacy and what this could mean for the communities of Stockport regardless of age. And I'll just hang back to Sharon just to pick up on maybe 1 or 2 of those other ripples that we've started to have and the things that we're hearing.
And I think, Jess, like you said, the points there are really, really clear, but I'm just going to elaborate on one of the stories. I met with one of the Translate group yesterday, and it just allowed me to think of the positive impact that it's had on practitioners. So one practitioner started off with the Translate group with a really negative relationship to movement that was inherent from her experience at school. She was really put off. When she engaged in the actual project, she was challenged to look at her own personal relationship with movement. And so she found something after many years that she's been struggling with, and she engaged in a Zoom activity. And she found that was really beneficial for her own well-being. And she thought to herself, well, children just need to find what is good for them. And so she went back and asked the children and said, can I share with you what I'm doing on this project? And she was able to talk to them and just to have that enthusiasm. Previously, she'd completely avoided doing any activity outside, inside. She'd passed that over to colleagues. But because of the project, because of looking at it through a different lens and having a challenge in her own relationship, she had that enthusiasm to share it with the children. And when she shared it with the children, they started to introduce something called Workout Wednesday, where they began to kind of discuss what they were doing, how they were doing. So it's put physical literacy on the map. And again, asking the children how they feel about relationships, how they feel about connecting. Lots of them have shared that they enjoy moving with their friends and wanted to introduce more. So now they have Twist It Tuesdays and Move It Mondays, all with opportunity for children to be positive, share their enthusiasm with their friends, but allowing them to think and feel. And it's making such a dramatic influence on children for the future. So I'm going to hand over to Jane just to share our call for action.
Yeah, so just to kind of summarise really quickly, I think in terms of kind of this approach, it's just been really, really positive in terms of kind of really establishing strong working groups, and it's really kind of sparked and kind of solidified some of the thinking from some of our early years colleagues. And that they really do want to kind of understand kind of what this is all about and the value that it can add into there. It's just on kind of onto the next slide, if that's okay. And then also kind of using kind of the existing Thank you. We've also kind of enhanced some of our existing resources, so it's things that it doesn't have to be created from new. We can just kind of add on and kind of add in kind of physical literacy lens, and it's also kind of worked towards a better connection between that group that we had already established before we kind of went on this journey. But it's really kind of solidified those relationships, added value to it, and really kind of connected people much further. So I think in terms of our next steps, we're looking to create a bit more of a guide to translate in physical literacy kind of within the early years, and kind of more opportunities for our kind of GM network to be part of this and to kind of share it more widely. So I think that kind of our message to anybody that's kind of thinking about kind of this approach or and adopting physical literacy within kind of their projects and programs is just to kind of drop that kind of physical literacy stain and kind of think about, how does that kind of relate to yourselves, and what do you need to translate that into action within kind of your area.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Lots of information there. So great. Sorry, I'm just going to flip back through the slides, and then we're on to our final group. Helen, Natalie and Olivia from Let's Play. I'll pass you over.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. My name is Olivia White. I'm the Head of Development at Henry, and Henry stands for Health, Education. Oh, sorry, go say that again. Health, Exercise and Nutrition for the Really Young. Helen, you're on mute.
We couldn't go the whole session without somebody saying.
We couldn't without a mute.
That would be wrong. I'm Helen Batterley, Early Years Physical Development Consultant, author, lecturer and chair of the National Early Years Active Start Partnership, which is a group convened by YST, which has been going for over a year now, where we bring together academics and professionals in the early years physical literacy, physical activity and movement sector.
So hello, I'm Natalie, and I'm a PhD researcher, so I bring kind of my research head, but I'm also university, as well as being at university, I'm also the early years lead for the International Physical Literacy Association, and we've got a few precious minutes to share our Let's Play project. It's part catalyst for change, part evidence inquiry. So we've very much got our research and in practice heads on, and this presentation is basically about, I think David Cook mentioned it earlier, that golden thread of physical literacy and how we can embed that in programs right from the start of life. Next slide, please. So this quote is one from some of my physical literacy and physical activity work. So in my PhD, I'm looking at the relationship between the two in preschoolers. And this quote really sticks with us as reflecting a common belief that physical development just happens. We open the door, out we let them go, and kind of job done. But what we know is that it's far more complex, and physical literacy and physical activity aren't the same thing. And physical literacy equally isn't about just that freedom to move and develop motor skills. It's weighting those balls equally. So it's the cognitive, social, emotional, and the movement skills, which is foundational at this age. So if you can skip on one more slide, and Olivia will give you a bit more context into Henry and the Let's Play project.
So thanks, Natalie. Henry is a national charity, and we support families to make small, manageable changes to their everyday lives, changes that best support health and development for children and for babies. We provide parent programs focusing on areas of low resource and high deprivation, and we also train professionals in the early years workforce so they can support parents, carers and families with confidence. We seek to start where families are at, and we walk alongside them as they make their changes, and we place empathy, inclusivity, respect at the heart of what we do. So Henry was originally set up as a response to the childhood obesity epidemic, and our focus over the years has diversified and shifted, and we've become more holistic. So the Let's Play project is about understanding and then taking steps to enhance our offer as to professionals and to families to integrate physical literacy informed approaches throughout all of our services at Henry.
Thanks, Olivia. Next slide, please. So what did the project look like? Well, Henry's mission was to give every child a happy and healthy start. Myself and Natalie wanted to begin by looking at all of the resources that the trainers and that the families access. So we looked at the manuals, the handouts, and the training sessions. We attended the training sessions. We also used online surveys and one-to-one interviews. So that enabled us to analyse the current perspectives of the Henry staff and the freelance trainers that are trained within that programme, that core content that then delivers that directly to families. We were looking to see what the current position of physical literacy and physical activity was within the current content, and what value it held there, and how it could be further embedded. So that was the whole research side of our project. Next slide, please. So then let's look at what that learning looked like. You can see some of the responses from our one-to-one surveys and also, one-to-one interviews and our surveys here. Now, one of the survey questions, for example, asked for judgment on a sliding scale with nutrition at one end and physical activity at the other end. And we were inviting those attendees to then place where they valued physical activity within that and where they thought that the content was for the programme. And what was interesting is that Henry trainers viewed nutrition as the bigger focus. And this is reflected in the time and amount dedicated to nutrition compared with physical activity. Intervention research often recommends both together as being more effective, but they are often delivered in isolation. So this was really eye-opening for us in terms of our analysis and looking at, okay, we know in terms of being healthy and being active, we've got to have that nutrition available for families, but also we need to have that comparative guidance on physical activity as well. Over to you, Nat.
Yeah, and it's something we see a lot kind of out there in the early years sector. I don't know if it resonates with anyone else, with partners often delivering a nutrition or a healthy eating intervention separately from physical activity. Whereas we know the research tells us that things together are more likely to be effective. But these quotes are just some from those Henry trainers, and some show the tension. So literacy is a big word in the early years. So physical and literacy, that can be a challenge. Also, the ethos of Henry as a kind of organisation, which is about, being non-judgmental, empathetic, behaviour focused, and not telling people what to do. And in a way, that is what physical literacy is too. So, one of the key takeaways is whatever is done needs to be, that golden thread needs to be explained and intertwined clearly and relevantly to that context. So it's been about drawing those connections to where PL is or isn't mentioned explicitly or otherwise in the Henry resources, or how we can take some of their beautiful existing resources and tweak them, but also about new content being developed. And there was appetite and appreciation of the importance of physical activity and to explore where and how it sits within the Henry context. So if you click onto the next slide, Olivia will now give you some of the, well, what does this mean for Henry?
Yeah, I mean, at Henry, our work starts today, really. We have our principles of physical literacy, and we have all the glorious data from Helen and Natalie. And that data shows a snapshot of our current understanding as an organisation. So as we begin to revise and to develop our parent programmes, our workshops and our professional trainings, we're going to begin to elevate physical literacy, highlighting its importance for overall health and development in babies and young children. I'm just going to emphasise the babies too. We'll begin to advocate more widely for the concept of physical literacy from birth, and imagine physical literacy is a golden thread throughout our work right from the start of life. We're going to ensure our workforce understand so that every baby and young child has a voice in their development, and that adults who care for them have a responsibility to meet their fundamental physical literacy needs. Over to you, Nat.
Next slide, because it's inspiring to see the receptiveness and intention from Olivia and Henry. But what we also know is there is a wide and huge support system around the young child's development. And as part of a response to this need, and one of the things, co-created to try and support Olivia in her training and her bolt-on courses that she's developing, is a kind of framework, a PL-informed framework, and we're calling it Building Blocks for an Active Start. And what this does, it involves 8 principles across people and place. So you can see the green blobs there on the infographic, and there's 8 little statements underneath it. So that kind of shows, and then if Helen wants to explain a bit more about those principles.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nat and I devised this, and crucially, we've mapped these principles to key messages as well as practical movement play ideas split into infants, toddlers and preschools. Now, what we have to be really conscious of as well is remembering stage of development. So we know that not all preschoolers will be at the same level, so there is some flexibility there within those categories. The Henry programme advocates for a healthy start for all families and specifically works with areas of need and deprivation, so meeting the needs of our most vulnerable families. And this was also key in developing that context, is thinking, you know, that starting point with those people, that not one size fits all, as we've heard throughout the day today. Placing physical literacy at the heart of the programme by embedding those key principles will give young children the strongest foundation for an active and healthy start in life. And then the last slide, over to Olivia, please.
Okay, so we hope to share the framework, Natalie and Helen's framework, in due course, and as well as our case study of our journey, we'll share that also. So please do read it and please do share it, and you too can use our principles in your work and consider if and how this physical literacy thread appears in the things that you do. We want to challenge the current status quo, and we want to challenge each other to consider physical literacy for young children and babies too. So let's play, Natalie.
Let's play.
Play.
That's all from us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. And thank you to all the speakers today. I know the team at Sport England and Deborah and Lenny have really enjoyed working with you over the last 9 months, and it's been really great to hear some of that journey that you've been on and about the approach and the key learnings that you've had. I can't see any questions in the chat, but if anyone would like to come off camera and ask a quick question. I know we've extended the session for 5 minutes. It's the same across all the groups. So if there's anyone who's got a burning question they'd like to ask to one of the groups, please, come on.
Yeah, so I have just popped a cheeky little PhD research ask in the chat. If anyone wants to think about how can we quantify physical literacy in young children, have a look at that, and welcome any conversations afterwards. But yeah, otherwise, any questions?
Fantastic.
Fire them at us.
Is anyone going to be brave?
I will.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Young. I'm a public health officer in North Yorkshire, and I also work alongside the Active Partnership. We are currently looking at the obesity level rates in early years, and they seem to be spiking. And as you say, when we've been looking at interventions, nutrition seems to be getting a lot of attention, whereas physical activity is kind of, we're trying to fight the corner for it a little bit more. And I'm looking to try and utilise some funding within the Active Partnership to do some exploration around sort of physical literacy, play in the early years, linked into sort of settings as well as VCSE organisations. And I was just wondering if there's an opportunity to maybe sit down with like Natalie and just explore a little bit of the learning and things like that a bit further in a bit more detail to make sure that we're capturing some of the learning from the wider sector and not just looking at stuff that's happened within North Yorkshire.
I would answer that immediately and say, of course I will. If there's any opportunity to chat about physical literacy, physical activity in early years, I'm there. So I'll put my email address in the chat, Laura.
Thank you.
And
It's really appreciated.
Also, Laura, just a cheeky shout out from Henry. If there's anything we can do, reach out.
Thank you, will do.
But that's great to hear. That's really good to hear that it's not an easy one, because we've got to think about what we're trying to understand and see a picture of, and then that will then give us the magical answer of what do we need to measure to get that, and then make changes. Because I always use this statement: we can't change what we don't know. And there's a lot about early years movement and physical activity. So I use a load of accelerometers on those, 200 odd children to try and understand how this, how it worked. There's not a lot out there. So in a very local level, there's different contexts, there's a huge variety between settings. So we do need to understand, you know, our own picture and context and location and etc. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Laura. Is there any other questions?
If not, I can take over and we can move into smaller groups for discussions. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Thanks, Deborah, and thanks again to all the speakers.
Cool. I'll just share my desktop.